Welcome back to the Attaching to God podcast, where we are exploring attachment-based neuroscience-informed spiritual formation and all the things that spreads out into. My name is Geoff Holsclaw, and this is produced by the Center for Embodied Faith. Today, we're kind of stepping out and starting kind of a new kind of thing with the podcast where we're going to have some regular guests who are on with us. So for this next season, we're going to be doing some different things, and that's great. And so for today, we have David Clayton with us. He's been on before. He's a spiritual director and supervisor of directors. He is a trained behavioral analyst and is a facilitator of psychological safety. He seeks to promote a holistic approach that emphasizes both inner development and practical application. He has his fingers on a whole bunch of other stuff. David, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Hi, Geoff.
And you're going to be, I think we're calling it kind of our regular reporter, the voice from the Kellia. I said it wrong, man. We were going to talk about it. Voice from the Kellia. What does that mean?
Well, Kellia is a group of cells from the innermost desert in the Nitri area, Asceticism. So around Wadi Natrum, that was around in the 4th century. But I think the idea of this sort of communication is to be something like, I suppose, a simple junior reporter from the desert tradition, and to draw some of the ancient understanding from the monastic and kind of integrate it in contemporary style with some of your attachment, neuroscience, psychological safety and behavioral analyst, and see what comes out in the mix, I suppose, and in conversation.
Well, that's exactly why I wanted to have you on. I know you wouldn't call yourself this, but you're an expert on all this monastic asceticism, spiritual formation, spiritual director stuff. But then you also have this deep kind of knowledge in the psychological sciences and behavioral analysis. Can you talk about really quickly those three things? So you're a trained spiritual director and a supervisor of spiritual directors. What does that mean for the people who might not know?
What does it mean? That's a very now that's we'll have a whole podcast on that, I think, Geoff. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I tend to describe my work setting across 3 sections that you described, all connected with a focus on sort of people and how we grow, I suppose. So as a spiritual director, I accompany people in their faith and in their life journey, helping them notice where God is, or God might be present or isn't, and deepen their prayer life and discern their choices, so that keeps them true to who they are. That's the sort of, I suppose, paradigm to develop into the nature of the true self, to use that quite Merton term, but to help them understand who they are and what they value. I trained formally with the Ignatian tradition and with the Carmelite tradition, and have spent a few decades reading books and studying and traveling and sitting at people's feet to listen and learn in various other traditions. So I do that.
Well, and we're going to be leaning on especially that for today's episode, which I forgot to mention. The theme is spiritual direction and friendship and how it connects to the whole rest of life. So we're going to get to that. But could you outline really quickly just what this behavior analysis training or expertise are that you have?
Goodness. Again, that's one of those terms. So
I will just keep it short.
For me,
David's a trained human lie detector, I think.
No. I wouldn't necessarily say that. So it's really about.
You were like trained by the FBI or the CIA.
I trained with under Joe Navarro on his training course, yes, and various other people, but yeah, not by those organizations specifically, people who have been trained by them. Let's be clear. I am not one of those experts.
Okay.
So for me, it's a role that's about studying behavior, looking at motivation, risk, and sometimes, as you described, deception. So it's using insights into how humans behave and why they act the way they do from a biopsychological neuroscience perspective. So understanding, the 7 basic emotions and how those emotional things and how emotional intelligence works. So drawing on people like David Matsumoto, Paul Ekman, David Goleman, etc., their kind of thing. So it's understanding how, why, and I find it gives me a very grounded perspective on the complexities of human relationships. And I think that's the essence of noticing what's really going on. I mean, I put something on LinkedIn recently where I commented, I think I quoted Ridge on it. Was it Fieldman? That people lie in a conversation, is it 8 times every 3 minutes or 3 minutes, 3 times every 8 minutes? It's a lot. It's a lot. And it's part of the social cohesion. And it is what it is. But there's a reality to how our emotions work with integrity, with good attachment, to use your kind of language, and bad attachment. So it's really about noticing that, and that can be done in all sorts of complex ways using technology that analyzes faces, vocal tone, language in written text as well now, which AI is becoming quite prevalent in. So the old idea of using a polygraph machine is going out the window as AI comes in to take over in some cases.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Well, so that's that behavioral analyst. Really quickly, then, you're also a facilitator of psychological safety. What is that? And we're probably going to have a whole episode on that at some point. But what is, just like, what's the big concepts of that?
So the big concept is psychological safety is one of the most important things shown by Project Aristotle by Google, and endorsed by, I would say, experts like Amy Edmondson out of Harvard. I trained with the Fearless Organizational Scan and operate from that analysis. So it is an assessment on how we respond to failure, how we respond to intercommunication, drawing the median of those quieter voices within group dynamics to be heard. Inclusion, recognition, and development from there, so that mistakes are, well, not that mistakes won't happen, but mistakes might happen more, but they are handled better in both an individual, intrapersonal, and interdependent, interpersonal. So it's very much a dynamic of moving from fear into safety. So from disordered attachment into good attachment. And we'll pick up on some of that later. And again, that also leans into me being an investigative interviewer as well, but another time.
Well, you have all these really amazing different skills, and they all, in a sense, you talk about, you're focused on people and how they grow. And so I know that your heart is spiritual growth ultimately, but there's also all these other kinds of areas of growth, and bringing it into kind of our modern, even business kind of life, our everyday life. Like, how do all these things kind of fit together? So for today's theme, you've been working on this idea of spiritual direction and friendship. You've been speaking and kind of teaching in different kind of places, and sometimes spiritual direction can sometimes just be categorized as a kind of spiritual friendship. But you're proposing that actually maybe we reverse those two things. Is what if all friendships were some kind of spiritual direction? And maybe I'm saying that wrong, but why don't you jump in and kind of fill that out a little bit?
Okay, so yes, I currently have done some talks on friendship in spiritual direction. I've written on the topic for the Carmelites, and I'm doing some further training with the London School of Spiritual Direction in November the 7th. Check out their website.
Sorry. Whoa. Time out. You're working with the London School of Spiritual Direction?
Yeah, I know.
With Jason Clark?
Isn't
he?
Yes. Yes, he's just taken over.
Yeah, I was just talking to him yesterday. We had a call just to catch up. I've known that guy for years. I'm so glad you guys know each other.
Well, I've just been asked to run this thing because I'd done it as a CPD training session for some other religious orders previously. Grand.
All right, sorry.
Small
that was
world.
A random aside.
No, that's
Very
grand.
Small
I'll connect up. If he's a good lad, that's fine. Well, I'll have a chat. So the thing is, I've been writing around friendship in spiritual direction, the dynamics in different religious orders, in different techniques, and from a psychological point of view, and from a psychotherapeutic, with transference and all of those sort of complexities, and also the Anam-Cara principle. The thing today, we're flipping it. So it's about what we're calling spiritual direction in friendship. So it's that process of internal work, intrapersonal development, developing our own attachments through interpersonal connections and things like that. So from the monastic point of view, the spiritual director, the Abba, the monos that advises, or the idia, as I like to, I don't know if I pronounce that right. Throughout this, if I pronounce things incorrectly, I'm not an academic, so I tend to mispronounce things. There we go.
Well, you're the reporter from the desert, so if you mispronounce them, I'm not going to correct you.
That's okay.
So outside of, there's no proper way of saying Augustine or Augustine.
Oh,
you can go either way.
Okay. I was going to reference him actually, but I didn't do it because I thought I'll keep it in the ancient. So the idea is, what did these monastic individuals from like the 4th century learn in their discipline? Because now we see things like mentoring and coaching prevalent in the business world, prevalent in group organizations and sports and everything else. So I've got to have a mentor, got to have a coach. That the pyramid scheme of coaches, training coaches out there is huge. It's just huge. So, but the monastics did it first. They have this thing that they would call spiritual direction. They would converse. They would converse. They would enable a safe environment to go deeper in the conversation, to go deeper into the analysis of self, and therefore become better. So the point is how can we learn from these guys and then become better people in our friendships? So our intrapersonal, developing our interpersonal realities, and learning from this kind of spiritual tradition, which has got so much wealth to it.
All right, so I'm going to say something controversial because I like getting David in trouble. Just kidding. But would you say, I'll say it, and then you could analyze whether I'm right or wrong about it. But mentoring, coaching, and dare I say even therapists all spring out of the ancient tradition of spiritual direction going back almost 1,500 years. That they were kind of, that the monks, the monastics, the ascetics in this tradition of spiritual direction of having someone who's walked the road of life further and longer than you as helping you. Is that true, or am I being a little provocative there?
I'd push it further and go into the development of anthropological religious formation of social engagement, where you have the development of the seer from the Middle Eastern tradition, which developed out of the death cult, and also linked into Judaism and Christianity and things like that. You have, if you look at the psychological and anthropological development of the elites, those that would be in a position of spirit. You could look at it from a position of the shaman. The base note of religious understanding, and I'd pick up on your point of emphasizing the monastic. The monastic, I'm particularly, I'm studying the Hospitalers at the moment because I did some work around that years ago, and our retreat house was based around a Hospitaler tradition. They developed the hospitals, they developed the academia, the universities. That and to educate was to draw forth a better person, not to create a cog that fits into a social framework. So I wouldn't, the language is different. I mean, you could drop it down to confiture, where it comes outward. So to confess to and have that deeper conversation. The monastic would call it exagerustis, which is a disclosure of thoughts. I've probably said it wrong, but hey, language is, please bear with. Language is not my strong point. I struggle with English, let alone French. So
don't ask me to spell any of these words. All right. Well, really quick, because I think the language of guru has kind of translated into like business talk, and that kind of gets used. But yeah, nobody calls themselves an entrepreneurial shaman, spiritual director. But there is a sense that guru, shaman, spiritual director, which are kind of these religious terms, have now kind of been lost. But we're all looking for mentors, coaches, and therapists. And so your hunch, just to kind of set up the conversation even more, is to say like, well, if we're looking for coaches, therapists, and mentors, why not go back to the ancient tradition and see what could still be learned that maybe we've lost? Is that did I?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful around the term of guru. I can't remember what it means. Is it weighty one?
I can't
remember. It's something like that. Somebody called me a guru once. I was having a conversation with them. Yeah, like a guru. You always get enlightened when you have conversations with you. And I went, I'm just a normal person. I do not wish to influence you. And that's one of the things, the difference on spiritual direction. Spiritual direction is an accompanying process. It isn't a directive act. When you talk about coaching is using I did these definitions for somebody the other day, because they really didn't understand spiritual direction. So coaching is using a set of practices to bring about a goal or an outcome. Mentoring is drawing on a person's experience to do the same, to develop a goal or an outcome, whereas spiritual direction is deeper. Some say, if you want to use the therapeutic parameter, counseling's here, psychotherapy's here, and then spiritual direction's right down in the depths, because it's trying to get to the absolute. So the absolute self and the absolute divine. I think I mentioned that on our last podcast together, tying it together, dovetail. So when we use the language, it's very difficult to go, it's specifically like mentoring, coaching. It's not. It is and it isn't. It comes out from that, but it's a much deeper reality. And I think in the business world, and there are people I heard, I don't want to misquote, I heard Teal Swan say, she was speaking to some business people, and some of them would be quite happy to go back to an Amish kind of way of living, a simple spirituality, and just carry a bucket rather than deal with the process of being a millionaire. I speak to coaches, and that seems to be a thing. There seems to be a need within people to find value. The existential reality of being human. You can have all the toys in the world, but if you don't know yourself, and if you're not connected, to use, the kind of language, then there's something missing. There's something missing. And that would be the emphasis I'd put onto it. It's not about an achievement. It's about a becoming. It's about, becoming something greater. Finding connections that are alive and where people begin to really flourish, not succeed, flourish. I wrote something recently, again on LinkedIn, quick story. A executive and a chaos magician walk into a bar. They sit down and have a celebratory glass or two of champers, celebrating their successes, their achievements. Then they go, what we're going to do next? Well, let's achieve some more. And then they realize that it is just a cycle of achievement to achievement to achievement to achievement to feel something. So they wander off to see a spiritual director on the edge of civilization. He says, sit down. Oh, I'll tell you what, though. Can you just pull up a bucket of water? This is straight out the Apathetic patrum, you can tell, in places. So they draw up a bucket of water out of the well. Because what do you see? Oh, it's dirty. All the sediment's floating around. Okay, put it down then. Wait, sit down. Let's just wait. So they sit down, they wait, they rest. He says, look at it now. What do you see? Well, it's clear now. I see the reflection of my face. Mm-hmm. So you see your true self? Yeah. Oh, go and do the same then. Mm-hmm. Sit, wait, slow down. And that's a lot of my work. And I as you know, I lead contemplative groups and train people in contemplation. So that's not meditation, that's into actual contemplation. So practicing towards it. So there's these things fit in. The Desert Fathers had this tradition of slowing down and understanding what's actual, not what's presented as a desire.
So how do some of these spiritual direction emphases, how are you proposing that they might kind of work their way into our friendships, but then also into how we go to work, how we are with our families, raising small kids? Is it what are some of how does this kind of like live in our modern technocratic lives?
Okay.
I know I'm asking the how question, and you're just going to be like, that's the wrong question. We have to, so that's perfect.
How's a really good thing, because we need to, and that's, again, to put in one of those nuggets, the part of asking for a word. You know, people would go to a monast, a guy living out in the desert, and they would go, can you give me a word? So it isn't a script or a set of processes. It's a piece of advice that is simple, concrete, and actionable. So what that's about is approaching somebody for advice that lowers a barrier, that isn't expert to somebody who needs help. It's just walking alongside. So again, this is where psychological safety is represented in the process, because people can just simply approach and ask for a word, and the word is simple, concrete, actionable. You know, go to your cell and let your cell teach you is one of my favorites. We'll come on to that.
Well, that's the whole point of the voices of the Kellia.
Yeah.
Go to your cell.
Yeah, go to your cell. Learn what's really happening. But it creates a safe environment where somebody who can be beginner or disciple, whatever you want to call them, can try to practice and fail, and can be accepted and learn to accept themselves where they're at, and learn and grow and safely grow. Because it's not safe. The thing about psychological safety isn't safe. It's one of the hardest things because it's taking the masks off. I think I mentioned before, there's a behavioral analyst who comments in one of his books, 4 phases of remembering what people are like. You know, we're all broken. We all wear masks. Mm-hmm. We all hide behind masks and don't want people to see. And we're all affected by our early development state. Mm-hmm. So that's either, 1 to 2, 0 to 2, 0 to 7, or 0 to 14, depending on critical thinking development, so, so how is I think there is something in that. I mean, it doesn't mean, and let's be very, very explicitly clear. We're not saying you need to go out to the desert. I mean, I've been out in the desert, several deserts, and spent time out and done all this, that, and the other, and spent time praying. But it's not about the physical desert. It's about understanding that rationale of vastness, I suppose, that existential reality, that what is the true self when facing the reality of which we get so many distractions. It's so easy just to go, I'll pick up my phone and dopamine, bang.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to tie off that part about going into the desert is, the first thing that a monk realizes when they go to the desert in the attempt to leave the city and all of its corruptions and distractions is they realize, I brought the city with me into the desert. Like my heart is full of distractions. It's full of the city. And really the work of the desert, as I understand it, part of it is to then be able to be the kind of person who can bring the desert, which is where you experience God's transformation, and be able to bring that back into the city, right? So that's everyday living. That's wherever you are. It's more complicated than all that, but that's kind of the goal, right? Is that we would be able to find God in the midst of all circumstances, and we'd be able to pray without ceasing. And that's what the desert's supposed to teach us. And so that could, in principle, be all of us, right? Yeah. So you, David, have literally gone and prayed into deserts for how long, right? And I have not done that. Most of us who are listening have not done that, but the things to be learned in the desert as the traditions have developed and that you've learned personally, they still can impact us, which is why we're going to have this continuing conversation with you over multiple episodes. All right. So let's pick it up. I was hearing things about practicing and failing. It's an accompanying process. Mm-hmm. We're all broken. We hide behind masks. We have our childhood formations that we're still, are these things then that spiritual direction kind of helps us all kind of keep in mind as we relate with other people? Is that kind of what you're explaining, or is there something a little deeper that
I would say
we could be
I'd
mining?
Say part of that emphasis is making vulnerability a non-negotiable part of the process. That the relationship or the conversation or the disclosure of thought, I won't try and say that word again, is kind of hardwiring it for psychological safety, so that there is the being able to let go of fear and be honest. So the spiritual director, or the Abba or Amma, the spiritual father or mother, this is not specific to that. That's consistent, non-judgmental in its response, and this creates, from the kind of science point of view, what we could call a feedback loop, where there is risk involved in disclosure, where there is reward because there is acceptance and guidance, consistency. So if somebody has an issue with attachments, then that will develop a safe attachment process, so that they become, if to use the spiritual dynamic, going fully safely attached to God in the fullest outcome, or to be safely attached in relationships so they can be free to be the person that they're called to be in interpersonal relationships. Yeah. So there's an increased trust in that, and there's a growth in trust. It keeps growing and keeps growing, whether it works or doesn't work, because failure is not. I just wrote a part on failure. I'm hopefully going to get it published, but I wrote on failure in the Ignatian tradition and psychological safety, and looking at it from a liminal space, that failure isn't a end point, it is a process in moving towards an outcome. So we have that trust growing in that kind of thing, So that gives a willingness to take greater risks, a growing in confidence, growing in selfhood, a growing in self-knowledge. So just to look at that practice of the Abba and the disciple, the spiritual director and the directee, this is exactly the same cycle that builds high performance and innovative teams. That exact same. So sports teams would be using that same, military, same kind of thing. Obviously with different dynamics because of the context. You make better people, you make better processes, you make better people, you make better relationships. So that is a container. We can look at this as a kind of an enablement towards apatheia, the dispassion in the kind of Stoic tradition, the being indifferent in the Ignatian tradition, and to be free, not being emotionless, but not reacting from disordered passions or wrong attachments. The process of letting go can happen within that. So this is a really, really deep psychotherapeutic process without even trying.
I love that. You mentioned the container. Could you just really quickly kind of list off again what is in that container? You say these are the aspects of like high performing kind of groups, or like, could you, I think I got a couple of them. I was writing them down, but could you kind of just list those again really quick? I know it was non-judgmental relationships, vulnerability, being able to fail.
Oh my goodness me. Okay.
Is that some of them, or is that
no?
Not
That's
some of
got
them?
Yeah. I mean, that would be going through the whole process again. That would be a bit repetitive.
Oh, okay.
I think looking at the container, the apathetic container is, if I was to paint a picture, it's an individual that is non-judgmental. And again, that fits in with the psychological safety of and neuroscience and attachment and all that, non-judgmental. That means whatever it is doesn't require an emotional reaction. It doesn't require a judgment. It doesn't require a critique. If it's a failure, then it's a failure. So you address that failure, analyze it, and then move forward. You take into consideration honestly. That's the thing. The two words I use all the time are actual and presented. So if someone's speaking, I'll go, is that actual or is that presented? And it's often just presented. And you go, well, what's the actual going on? What's behind the mask? What's the shadow work? What's the logismoi going off in the background? So it's allowing that inner stillness that the spiritual director has to be in a place, or we'll use that term, or the person or the relationship has to be in a place where there's still, quiet, hesychasm, where so that they are calm and they can enable another person to be calm. And if you can think of that dynamic, so if we're going to use business if you had a manager who's mature, high emotional intelligence, actual high emotional intelligence, not presented, because there's often people will present emotional intelligence and you can just taste in the background that they're not. It's just a facade. So that takes work. And if they are just non-reactive to somebody and listen and then give small concrete advice, then you're building a system. Do you want me to jump into logismoi? Because your eyes flashed when I said that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Shall we do it?
What is
a logismoi? What is logismoi? It's a little furry creature that lives on the moon. No, it's not, funnily enough. But I just had to drop that pun in. So, Evratius Ponticus, he along with Cassian, but we'll focus on Evratius. So, calls them the 8 evil thoughts. This is where we get the 7 deadly sins from and all that kind of thing. the basis of it is, I'll explain what they are. I'll go through the list. But the basis of it is disruptive thoughts. So if you think about a mill pond, and if a mill pond is disturbed by little stones plopping into it, those little stones that plopping in it are those thoughts that are negative, that are not moving towards quiet, or we could say wholeness, or good attachment. I won't use psychological health because I do think Maslow's attitude towards analysing psychological health is quite helpful to hold in view here, that psychological health isn't this standard mark. But Maslow describes it as a person who is moving towards actualization is actually in psychological health, more than somebody who would present being coping. I hope that's okay to drop that little, because
that's a whole nother episode. To talk about Maslow and his work and how that may or may not be helpful for spiritual formation. But we'll just put that to the side.
Another day. There's so much. And again,
I'm going to add it to the list.
I'm trying to stick to as much as we put on this list. So the list of the logismoi, so the passions, we'll call them. Is that okay to use that? So the 8 passions: gluttony, lust or fornication, avarice or love of money, dejection or sadness, anger, despondency or listlessness, vainglory, and pride. So what they are seen as is that which is moving against, shall we say, the integral image of the whole self, the Christ image, the icon, to use spiritual language. And in a way, it's an ancient form of neuroscience operating in this, because if we think about that container of spiritual direction, if you use that language, that's relational safety. That with contemplative practice or quietening or slowing down, that actively reshapes the brain and its pathways.
Mm-hmm.
So from those, that will be reducing things like anxiety, reactivity, moving towards peaceful choices, better choices, a better intrapersonal dynamic, which develops a better interpersonal. So spiritual direction knocks on to better friendships, better group working, better. So it sounds, as if we're going, oh, is this super spiritual? These are really grounded, practical realities that can operate. And I am aware of a lot of, I'm going to use the word business, but I don't necessarily just mean in economic, but people who are active in influence, who are actively seeking that dynamic and going, where do I find mindfulness? What yoga retreat can I go on? How can I do this, and this? And well, here's some practical things that you don't really need to. It doesn't mean going in simple. And personally, I like to keep things simple, And if it's moving towards peace and compassion and a better focused attention, then there's going to be better outcomes. This sort of looking at that sort of things shown in, I think it's a book called How God Changes Your Brain by Newberg and Waldman. And there's also, have you got it? Siegel, Developing the Mind, working on the interpersonal brain development. Yeah, here we go. So I thought you'd have that. That's why I dropped it in.
That's right. Well, I have the other one too.
Do you?
The Developing Mind by Dan Siegel. Absolutely.
So they fit. is what I suppose I'm trying to show.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of I love this because you're opening the door for so many future conversations, which is why this season and maybe the whole Attaching to God podcast is going to kind of have people like David who are coming in to kind of bring in their expertise, and we're just going to kind of keep mulling it over. But like that whole idea of the logismoi or the intrusive thoughts or the passions, like I feel like we could spend a whole time
We
on
could.
that. Is the idea that, in a sense, that whole language of the logismoi, of the intrusive thoughts, and you mentioned, the brain science, right? So this is going to our cultural formation, our personal formation, our neural formations, and kind of those thoughts that just spring up out of us. Is that a way of kind of getting to, you mentioned the actual and the presented, is that a way of helping to get to the actual, like what's actually happening rather than just the masks that we're wearing? Or is that not the right way to kind of think about it?
That's a clear way, go to your cell and let your cell teach you. Strip away the distractions. There's that old adage, who are you when you sit in a room on your own?
Right.
So many people, on LinkedIn, I did a little, it was a thing on lying. And it drew out the point. Brain just went, it drew out the point. So, I think, sorry, there's a noise in the background. You can't hear.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
Just as a little last kind of thought there was for these like intrusive thoughts, which become like the 7 deadly sins, which feel very judgmental. But the earlier tradition of Aegrius, Pontus, and John Cassidy, they actually just meant them as diagnostic tools. Like there's not supposed to be a moral heavy-handedness about, having these thoughts, but rather you're supposed to then reflect on them, right? See yourself in the bucket of water a little bit, right? And so how does the spiritual friendship or the spiritual direction piece, like with another person, how does it fit in with these kind of things?
So that's the point would be to go to your cell, to realize those things, and then to have the psychologically safe conversation. You know what I mean? I suppose in a way, if you were to use business, it's that trusted advisor principle of being in a space where you experience those depths, you recognize. So you would go, for instance, let me just think if I could. Is there one? Okay. So Avalok went to see Abba Joseph and said to him, Abba, as far as I can, I say my little office, I fast often, I pray and meditate, I live in peace, and as far as I can, I purify my thoughts. What else can I do? This guy's doing all right. The old man stood up, stretched out his hands towards heaven. His fingers became 10 lamps of fire. And he said to him, if you will, you can become flame. So it's and that's not the best example, but it's in a way helpful to think that there is always more. There is always a growth. There is always, people go, I had somebody come to me in spiritual direction and say, I've dealt with this passion. And I went, oh yeah. Of course you have.
Good for you. Yeah.
Exactly. So the point is recognizing, going and having a conversation gives you that extra bucket, that extra container to be able to process this at depth and then go back to your cell. So there's this it's a very much it's the philosophy of responsibility, responsible to self and responsible to others in the context of good social. Use that term civilization because I really don't know what it means anymore. So it is that And really, we see in the business world this desire, and I'm saying business world, but in all the world, I need a mentor, I need a coach, I need somebody, a guru. Yeah. So really, it is that principle. But Francis, let's be clear, Francis de Sales said, and he was quite an influencer in the spiritual direction kind of setup, they're rare as hen's teeth. So just because somebody calls themselves a spiritual director doesn't mean that they have done the inner work and carry the quietness to be able to hold others at depth. If you've done a certificate in spiritual direction, that doesn't make you a spiritual director. That means you know a method. If you've done coaching certificate, that means you know a method of coaching. That doesn't make you a good coach. And that's one of the things. So it's a matter. There's an actual to it.
You could add pastor and therapist to those.
Oh, absolutely,
also.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of psychotherapists that I know that I go, you are bonkers. Anyway, I say that in jest, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, so this is just kind of an initial conversation, an initial kind of sounding, hearing the voices from the Kellia, from the desert, from the cell. Any last thought that you're like, oh, I want to be sure that, I leave kind of people with this. We've kind of been going deep, which I think is great. And I know that when we have time with you, as we move on, like making it practical, as the sayings from the desert, advice that's simple, concrete, and actionable. Do you have anything? I'm asking you for a word, David. Do you have a simple, concrete, and actionable word for us today? So much pressure, huh?
That's
all right.
I can't. Right. I'm just thinking which way to go with it. I think.
Why don't we can just give it a minute and let the Spirit lead you?
Well, I think the emphasis here, I think it's a useful one. If we're going into the actual, that we haven't spoken about humility, we haven't used that specific term. So I think, I'd quote again Apathetic Patrum, because I gathered a few quotes just in case. It is a great thing to be able to say with your whole heart, I and the Father God are one. Surely it is a greater thing to say, I and the leper are one. And to remember, we're all vulnerable. We're all broken. And that offering safe, unsafe, where people can be honest and integral and take their masks off, is such a gift. But again, it takes responsibility and it takes integrity. So I think my final point would be to remember that none of this can happen without integrity, without humility, without actual character, which takes time. It takes formation, and that takes somebody else helping you along the journey. I give thanks to those people that have been my spiritual directors over the years. I would not be where I am today without their being able to contain my conversation with them, my journey. So I would, I think we've covered some, but there is so much to do, Geoff. There is so much to do.
So we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, love to.
Well, I think that, and I wrote this down I have lots of follow-up conversations that I've been typing while you've been talking, is because I think sometimes people misunderstand in the spiritual tradition outside of the monks and monastics, right? Just reading any of the spiritual literature, you will regularly run up to this the humility that sometimes comes across as like a radical self-abasement or even radical self-condemnation that you kind of hear. But I think it's it's the spiritual kind of mentors creating this space of vulnerability and saying, hey, even I that you put up on a pedestal am still of, the wretched ones. Even all of us are still wounded. And that what looks very negative, because in our modern mind, it's all about self-esteem and productivity and positivity, right? But if you're going to create a culture that's really vulnerable, that's open to the brokenness and woundings of others, then, like with the psalmist, you just have to say, I too am the wretched. I too am the wicked. I too am numbered amongst the damned. And if I can say that, then you can say that. And if we can all say that, then we can be open, and then we can start moving forward. And
Yeah.
so that just, am I getting that right, or am I kind of missing that there?
That sounds beautiful. I mean, we could go into ascesis and discipline, which again is another thing around the coaching that we were going to talk about, but haven't got in this time.
Oh, it's on the list.
Yeah, it's not an abasement. It's not an abasement. Humility. I mean, I would throw in, because I'm a bit of a gardener, I would throw it humus, the soil, the basis of the growing area of the soil where things decompose. So there has to be a breaking down to bring life. Ignatian spirituality specifically talks about life from death. On his tomb, there's an image of him laying, and there's a tree growing out of his stomach to express that it doesn't end. And
that's St. Francis?
No, it's St. Ignatius of Loyola.
Oh, really? So there's pictures of him like that? I have never seen that.
Yeah, I've got it in a book. I had to show somebody once. They didn't believe me.
Too.
It's on his tomb somewhere.
Wow. Okay.
So,
well, I don't really know how to wrap. So I'm already asking you to wrap it up now. I've done the preacher's thing where I didn't wrap it up, but we just kind of went on another circle around the thing, and I started talking about humility and vulnerability. But thank you so much, David, for being with us. You bring such a wealth of knowledge as well as practice and experience. And I got a list of humility, the passions, logismo, ascesis, discipline. I have a whole other list somewhere else from past conversations. So we're just going to add to it, and we'll just kind of keep slowly bringing in the great riches, right, from the desert, and seeing, kind of laying them out bit by bit, and seeing how it can, help us. So thank you for being the guide for us.
Well, thank you for the conversation, and I hope people find it really, really helpful in a way, and it brings some inspiration, and we get better in interpersonal lives. We live better, whether it's in high economics or spirituality sectors or political sectors, or that we really do the work, inner work, and get the outer work, and people for it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is, so we're signing off from our desert correspondence, and we'll do this again in another couple, 4 or 5 episodes.